But it's not enough that the action be good or at least neutral of its type. It has to be done with a good intention. And not only does it have to be done with a good intention, but the circumstances all have to be in place so that the action is fitting. It's not so much that it's a matter of a good kind of act in itself, it's that it also has the circumstances have to make the act fitting to place here and now. So again, to go back to the joke-telling kid at the gloomy Thanksgiving dinner. Telling a joke is fine, right? It isn't the kind of action that's wrong if it's wrong in itself. And the intention of the kid, let us say, was good. He was trying to make people laugh and lighten the mood a little bit. But the circumstances, namely the grandmother's emotional fragility, made it an unfitting act to place at this time and place. Maybe next year would be better, but not now, see. So, object has to be there, the intention has to be there, and circumstances have to be fitting. It's interesting and important to note that a further good intention does not really alter or change a bad means. A good intention isn't enough to rescue a bad means, and a bad intention, well, I say a bad intention is enough to ruin an otherwise acceptable act, but a good intention is not enough to ruin an otherwise acceptable bad act. Example. Euthanasia. There are two hospital rooms. Both have elderly patients who are dying. The elderly relative is in pain. Morphine is prescribed to relieve the pain. In room A, the people who order the morphine to be given are motivated by a desire to end the pain of the sufferer, but they choose as their means an action which will bring about the death of the sufferer. That is their ultimate aim is to end suffering, but their proximate aim is to bring about death. Okay? That's an example of an action with a good ultimate aim to relieve pain, but the action is completely ruined by the choice of death as a means to bring this about. Okay? That's different from another person. It's not, that's not as morally bad, but it's still morally bad. It's not as morally bad as this case, where, in fact, you give the morphine not because you want to relieve the pain, although that's not unwelcome. You give the morphine because you want the person to die so that you can inherit the money before it's all spent on hospice or hospital care, you see. I mean, it could be that your furthest aim is to get the inheritance. The proximate aim is the death of the person, and then the means is the morphine. That's just straight out murder. You go to another case where the ultimate aim is to relieve the pain, but the choice of the means is still bringing about the death. That's still murder. You see, it doesn't change the fact that it's murder because your aim is bringing about the death. See, even if it's for a good motive, murder remains murder. But then there's a third case of the same identical material action. Here, the death is not intended as a means to an end. Here, the death is foreseen as a side effect of the action. So you give the morphine. Somebody taking a video camera of the same actions would not be able to tell any moral difference. But in the third case, you give the morphine not to bring about the death of the person, but because you want to relieve the pain, and you foresee that death will be the result, but that the death is not what you're aiming at. The death, your purposes are not frustrated if the person would live, you see. You can tell when you're aiming at something If it doesn't occur, you're frustrated. See? If you come at the end of the day and you say, Grandmother's still alive, I thought we gave her enough morphine, that means you had murder. Grandma's still with us. Oh, good, but she's not suffering, is she? See the difference? See? If the death of the person is what you're aiming at, then it's murder. But if it's a side effect, a foreseen side effect of your action, it's not. Now, this can be tricky, and I want to end up with where I started, the case of the skull that's crushed. I think that there are some actions that are so close to how do you put this? Some actions are so closely bound up with their effect that it's hard to separate the effect from the action. It's so closely bound that the effect, in effect, is the action. So, for example, if you're going to drop the bomb on Hiroshima, the death of the civilians, is that a result of dropping the bomb, a side effect of dropping the bomb, or is that just what dropping the bomb means? It just is the death of those civilians, you see? I mean, you could have a different moral analysis. If you think of the death of the civilians as a foreseen side effect, you might look at it one way. But I would think that dropping an atomic bomb on a city is an action which is constituted by the effect of the death of these people. I mean, I don't think that death follows as a result. I think in this kind of case, you have to say that you're really aiming at the death of the people in the town. You can't just say it's an unwelcome side effect. It's just impossible. You have to say somehow that the death of these civilians is precisely what you were aiming at. Even if you might be overcome by feelings of sadness at the death of all these people, that's irrelevant. The point is that dropping a bomb of that kind on a populated city just is death-bringing to these people. I would argue, although Grisey and Finnis disagree, that when you come to the case of the abortion and reshaping the size of the skull of a child, I would think that when you crush the skull of a child, it's a little bit like dropping an atomic bomb on a city. Death follows so immediately and necessarily upon the action that you can't really describe the action as anything other than bringing about the death of the child. In other words, an act of direct killing. Now, that's not always the case. Some actions the effects of the action are more clearly separable from the action. The more separable an effect is from the act, the more you're able to argue about double effect and say the effect is foreseen but not intended. But when an effect is really tied up with the actual performance of the act, so closely tied up with the performance of the act that it's indistinguishable from the act, if you aim at the effect, you aim at the act. Or if you aim at the act, you aim also at the inevitable effect. At least that would be my argument. At least it would be my argument in cases of abortion, and it would be my argument in case of euthanasia. I'll admit a counterexample to show you that this is a complicated case, and our arguments are all taken. Our cases are covered by intuition. What would you think about the case of the person who is at 9/11, the plane has crashed into the building, and you jump out of the building, the fire is there, and you jump out. The effect is your certain death. But I would argue that you're not committing suicide when you jump out the window. So that's a complicated example. Okay, I'll leave you with that to think about. Those are some of the problems in action description. Thank you.